Welcome everybody. Good morning. I'm María Victoria Pérez-Rios. I teach at the Political Science Department, and I'm going to demonstrate or mimic what we will call a not a face-to-face, an online synchronous meeting using Blackboard Collaborate. The theme of my class meeting was police reform, policing in general. I wanted to present it with two of my students, Roxana Dobre and Cassandra Martinez Rosario. If they're not able to make it, I have their PowerPoint presentations, and basically I will just comment briefly on them on the presentations if they don't come in. I mean, if they come in, of course, they will spend longer time explaining them to you. I know that according to the program, Professor María Elena Pizarro was going to participate too, but she was unable to do so. And I have, if we have the time, she was kind enough to share with us one of the assignments that she has that is similar to what I do in the classroom. It has to do with police reform. So I will share it at the end during the Q&A if anybody's interested when we wrap up the session. So I'm just going to start with the overall what we are going to do today. So basically, my class, like any, in any classroom, this will be for the presentation. I do will be like the welcoming remarks. I'm just going to explain to you in which classroom do I use which type of course. So I don't know how many of you have used Blackboard Collaborate. I know that most people tend to prefer Zoom. I just prefer Collaborate. For the time being. It was in the beginning with privacy issues, and I think it's already my students already use Blackboard for assignments and tests. So I think it's very interesting in that sense to have Collaborate in their learning system. They have it there already. I know there are other problems with it, and then in the Q&A we can assess the problems and comments on that. So basically, my students were the course was Law, Political Science 259. It's basically comparative criminal justice systems. So it's very important that the students get a sense of other possibilities of how to regulate crime and different criminal justice institutions by also comparing what we do in the US with what is done in other places around the world. The number of students, I say 28 plus because, as the semester was going on, some students just withdraw, some of them unofficially, so around 28 students. The theme of this specific meeting is what is a democratic police force and police reform in the US with a focus on the NYPD, because this semester, I think, close to 100% of my students were from the city. So sometimes I get students from New Jersey or they are upstate, but this semester they were all from the city. So we focus on the NYPD. So this on the side, I just have very low stakes. I did captioning of the course room that I will use, and usually I will have a title for it and with the day of the session. So then what I wanted to do for this outline presentation. So basically the first 30 to 40 minutes of the presentation today, I wanted to do, as I said before, the mimicking of a synchronous meeting online. And basically, again, this will be welcoming remarks and class outline. And I use the parentheses to show the tools that were used during the sessions. So I use chat for the welcoming remarks and class outline. Then is a second section in which during the meeting we will do an interactive lecture. So I talk, but also my students participate and they talk themselves or use the chat on the side, on the like in Zoom is on the right side of the screen. I also ask them if some are sharing by talking to the class, other students can, and I myself write on the whiteboard. So if we are talking about characteristics, we mention some of the characteristics. If we are talking about functions, we do that. And I also use the polling for certain questions. In this class specifically, I use the polling. The interactive lecture would be, I went over the review about policing, what are the main functions, and also the focus of the class was what is a democratic police force. The part that I think maybe was interesting for the students is that they actually apply themselves what a democratic police force will look like by themselves creating their PowerPoint presentations, each of them individually on police reform. So that was done through a screen sharing. Today, it's not going to be an individual screen sharing, but it will be the same PowerPoint presentation. I have incorporated them into my PowerPoint presentation. Then the other students in the class did the comments through audio and chat. And as in any regular be it online or face-to-face class meeting, we ended up with a wrap-up with reminders for the upcoming week. And then for today, I expect to be Q&A. I also was thinking of students commenting on their two presentations, what they learned from it, what did they gain from it. Here was a little bit, I will explain in a moment. So now I'm going to go step by step on the synchronous meeting. So the first section is how do I start the class? So I start with welcoming remarks and a class outline. The purpose would be, this is done, I think everybody does this in any type of class. Online is not different in that sense. You have to set up the mode so students realize now is the beginning of the class, we have to start learning. And usually what I do is I chat, and this is audio and chat with my students, because some students usually come a couple of minutes before the meeting, and also have the issue of students coming a little bit late. So if I have 20 to 30 students, I do wait till we have like at least 17 students in the class, or 5 minutes to 7 from the beginning of the actual starting time, no more than 7 minutes after the starting time of the regular class. Meanwhile, what I do is, so students that are there earlier, after I talk to them for a while, I also provide an outline of what we are going to do in the class. I had an issue with my phone, so I couldn't put it here, but it's basically using the chat, again, as I said before, on the right side of the screen, from collaborate to basically, so all the students, the ones that were there from the beginning, the students that come in later, they know what we are going to talk that day, and it's usually 3 to 4 items. I don't go beyond that. Then, as I said, so this I did much faster, and in real time, this will take around 10 minutes. So while you talk to students, and we actually start the more, I will say, the moment in which we are going over concepts and new ideas in the class, or revising previous knowledge from past weeks. I'm just going to move to the next. So the second section, once we finish with the welcoming remarks, I start with what would be an interactive lecture. And this, I hope I can do this so I can show it to you. So it's interactive because actually I'm not the only person talking. I will have students, they will raise their hand, they will participate, and I will ask them typical questions about when we talk about policing. Basically what I will do is open up the whiteboard. And I try to do this in a way that, I don't know, can you see it? Can this be, more or less, I mean, it's not perfect. So basically, I will ask students about the main functions of policing. So at the same time, we will have students using the hands up, to ask permission to talk. Other students will be writing on the whiteboard, and at the same time, you will have here different students basically talking about the issue on the sideline. And at the end of all of this, of putting together all of these ideas, I will just basically group it. I know it doesn't look perfectly organized, but basically students get the idea of what do the main functions of a police force. We go helping people, like it's more like social work, crime prevention, also punishment. In a way, people see it as they arrest people and declaring in court as making sure that the person that breaks the law gets punished. even though the punishment is going to be done by the courts. And then an issue that I have found out is that sometimes the students focus too much on this side, but forget that police officers also enter in, I will say, in opposition to sometimes the rights of the people, which is the right to demonstrate. This is the public function in which the police force has to side sometimes with the government and in opposition to citizens. And this is the one that usually students have more trouble talking about. But because of the importance of Black Lives Matter movement, especially with the confinement, last year, some of my students, I would say a higher percentage than usual, were very aware of this type of, say that overall action of the police. So I'm just going to, that would be, this will take usually much longer. We will be in this for around like 10 to 15 minutes. And then we'll, let me see if I can, oh, sorry, as my, here I just didn't, okay. Oh. And now it's too tiny, okay. And then the next, within the interactive lecture, we'll move on to the democratic police force, and this is more of that was the overall, I will say, idea for the presentation that the students were going to do, was a democratic police force. And the democratic police force, sorry about that, just one moment, I'm going to go back. So the issue with the democratic police force is that there's only like 3 main characteristics that we focus on. And the US is supposed to be Anglo-Pilian police force, and that means that they are civilians that basically are making sure that the streets are safe for other civilians. Even though in the media, the average person thinks that police officers are not civilians. So this is something that we have to discuss, and I usually do that in the classroom. And then we go over the democratic police force. And I wanted to emphasize here, I do the rule of law, because some students don't understand exactly the concept. And here is where I usually ask them, I'm just going to put this in a bigger, I use here also the poll, because I give them, so you see that the students will be doing here the whiteboard. They will be talking audio, each of them in an orderly fashion, but at the same time they will be answering, and I don't know if you can see this, a poll. And this has to do with the rule of law, because when we talk about democratic police force, we talk about the need for professionalism, because in dictatorships really that's not the overall uptake that sometimes, I mean, it depends on the country that we are talking about, but it's very important in a democratic police force. Usually police officers, the ones that are in contact with the average citizen, they tend to be, and I'm talking about citizen in a very, with individuals, I'm not talking about in a strict way of having the passport or nationality of a given country. Those individuals in democracies, they tend to be more educated than individual police officers that work for the police force in dictatorship. So a high degree of professionalism. Another characteristic that is well understood by students is that they have to uphold human rights, which will include civil and political rights, and then the issue of respect for the rule of law. And this last one is the one that causes the most problem, and we usually spend sometimes 10 to 15, 10, I would say 10, almost 15 minutes discussing the issue and providing examples. So to make sure that the students understand what the rule of law means, I know it's a difficult concept, but trying to have a first understanding of it as it pertains to a democratic police force, I asked them the question about whether it is legitimate for the police to escort a singer, famous singer, to their concert because they are running late. And some students will consider, yes, they are in the minority usually, but some students consider, well, yes, there are, in their mind, they're a public figure that deserves different treatment from the authority. And they say, well, they also provide police escorts to pregnant women. And of course, then you have the engagement of the students saying, well, yes, but the pregnant woman will be the social worker type of helping the regular citizen in a time of need, vis-a-vis a private citizen like a singer that, yes, if they arrive late to their work, they should have, started off in their trip earlier. And sometimes you will have students saying, well, when I run late to class, nobody, the police is not going to escort me. So it's kind of an interesting take on the rule of law. And with that, I will transition, and that's basically the way I will wrap up talking to students about, if it's clear the type of characteristics of a democratic police force, and then students will present their PowerPoint presentations. So in this case, we'll use screen sharing in the class, and basically all the students answer. They were required to do three slides, no more than that. And in the first slide will be why do we need or we don't need police reform. Then to focus on two reforms that they thought were fundamental or important, and then their individual action. What do they think they can do either to further police reform or basically to stop police reform? If some student, they thought that police reform was not necessary. And I'm going to try to go back and check to see if my students are there. The way I had it organized, I had first Roxana Dobre and then my other student, Cassandra Martinez Rosario. So I'm just going to go back and see, what's happening. Yes. Oh, hi. Yes, I'm going to check if they are. No, it seems that my students are not there. Okay. So if anybody has any questions now, because I'm going to go over my students' slides because they have not come in. So anybody has any questions about my presentation up to now? Hello?
There's a question in the chat box.
In the chat? Yes, let me go to it.
Yep.
Yes.
Sorry, the question that's in the chat box, it says, it seems that there's a large percentage of time in class, that large time in class is being spent on interactive exercises. How do you reserve sufficient time to actually cover new material?
The issue is that I expect students to do the learning on their own, because I only meet with them to emphasize what I consider the most important concepts or ideas that they need to really understand. I mean, the characteristics of different types of, for example, in the chapter on policing, they can learn on their own the percentage of privatization of police force. They can learn how many years police officer needs to study in the model countries, which tend to be the UK, Germany, France, China. Sometimes we will talk about some other countries depending on their textbook. I provide them with outlines. So what is more of the factual, I expect them to do it on their own. And then in the classroom, I go over what I consider more problematic type of issues, like, for example, understanding how the police officers from a democracy, this is my view, are supposed to be different from police officers in non-democratic regimes. So that's why this is not what I do in all the classes. They do not present PowerPoint presentations in all the classes, but for this one, I thought it was important because many of my students were talking about the police reform. So this is just one of my, I mean, I usually don't have PowerPoint presentations, and this is their final paper. And they only did another PowerPoint presentation on bail reform, which I thought it was important because it were like very current issues and that needed some change, and I think they need to assess them on their own. So I usually don't see it as losing time. I mean, I just basically I meet with them for what I consider is important for me to explain to them, and they have very comprehensive outlines. And again, I think that data, the more
my
factual
God.
should go on there. But that's my view. I mean, it's the way I do my classes. Yes.
So there is a follow-up question from Bernadette, and it says, do you find they actually learn better or on their own asynchronously? She finds that undergrads are having a hard time largely self-teaching.
Yes, that could be, but these are already, I mean, I guess some undergrads, these are already like 200 level students. So I also provide them with office hours, as I always say. And I have had some students that use them, some students choose not to. But on the, again, it's kind of being in a classroom, just because the students are there, and this is another issue. I don't know if this has happened to other people. My students, at the beginning, they didn't want to show their faces, and you cannot force the students to be showing their faces. So I just say, okay, so if you can opt for that. I don't even know if I were to meet with them and give them a lecture that they would actually be attending. Like basically they're there, but I don't know if they're there. So I basically my classes, when I was face to face, I used to write the outlines on the blackboard or whiteboard that we have nowadays. And my purpose was for them to take notes so that they could be learning while I was explaining the different concepts. But I provide them with those notes on their own. So if they want to, I mean, in a perfect world, we will be able to meet with them, but with 28 people, I don't know the alternative. So I just focus on what I consider the most important issues, and I allow them to, I mean, I know that not all the students are reading, but I allow the students to participate, so they show me what they have learned from the text. And if they don't, then of course, I put my input there. I don't know if that helps out. I mean, I'm not saying that it doesn't. Of course, in a perfect world, we will be able to, to maybe transmit our what we know about the subject knowledge to students. But I think online with 28 students, I cannot deliver that. They have all the means to do it if they want to. But that's, I mean, again, my position or my view. Yes, thank you. And yes, other questions? Sorry, I think my view is not the best because I cannot see people. What is happening here? Okay. Yes, any other questions? Any questions? Did it? Hi, hello.
Are there any other questions that we have?
Okay. This I don't know. Yeah, I don't see my students. I'm trying to check my students. Yeah. So if that's okay, I will then go over my students' presentations, and maybe you will have some questions about their presentations, and I will explain. Since my students, I don't see, I'm trying to check again to see, but I don't see anybody else. So I don't see my students. Is there, Cassandra, are you there? No. And Roxana. So I'm just going to explain how students prepare before class their presentations and what I ask from them and what they show to us. I thought they did a good job. And let me go over this again to see, to share the screen, and if they can, let's see. Yes. Can you see my screen? Yes, hello.
Yes, we can go ahead and we can see your PowerPoint.
You can see the PowerPoint. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yes, I'm just going to do that. I mean, I thought they will Okay, maybe they just couldn't. So I'm going to go down to what I asked from them. Let's see, I think it was here. So these are the instructions. Let me just put this so you can see it. I know, and I was the first one that said you're not supposed to have like a huge too much. I know. I just want because I didn't think I was going to use it. I thought my students will come, and it takes them a good 7 minutes because they do talk about the comments. So I'm just going to go over this. So the PowerPoint from the students comes from a assignment that they did beforehand. So to do the assignment, basically they had to go over at least some outside sources that were not the textbook. So in the last Synchronous meeting, I asked them to post 3 PowerPoint slides, and I asked them to post it via discussion board because that way other students could see them. And if they wanted to, I didn't force them to do that because I thought that the PowerPoint was already enough and they were going to look at it later on in the classroom, to at least look at a couple of them and comment to one of the PowerPoints from the students. Basically, I wanted them to feel, I mean, how what they were learning about policing had a real impact in their lives, maybe not in theirs directly, or they don't see it that way, but maybe in their community. And I think all of them live in New York City. So it was like the best time. This was during the fall semester. And so we had all the discussions on during the, earlier on in the year about police reform, bail reform, and they were interested in it. So the first slide, as I mentioned before, was is police reform, and this is the way I presented it to them. So I tried to do it as open-ended in the sense I didn't presuppose that police reform was necessary. So why we don't need police reform, and provide 2 or 3 main reasons and some statistical data on why, yes or no, you think that is necessary. The second slide, in the case if you support reform, they had to focus on 2 reforms. And then I asked them to use at least 2 newspaper articles or journal articles. And if they disagree with police reform, I asked them to add 2 sources that are against police reform, because they already had, hopefully in the first slide, the reasons why they were against police reform. Then the third slide was their individual action. What do they think they could do to further police reform or to stop police reform? And this will depend on their answer to slide 1. They had 3 points for this. And then I asked them to do one earlier before the class. And they did. I mean, I think it was one of the times that almost everybody presented their PowerPoint. And I'm going to give you 2 examples. These are examples of students that that said that they will be willing to present, and they follow the basically the instructions that I gave to them in the assignment. Their slides were much fancier, but I just, to integrate them, I could not change their, I mean, they were more beautiful, but I just kept the color palette that they had. So Roxana Dobre basically went directly over why, and she said why, and she went over important, she didn't do a lot of statistical, but she has the issue of the 1,000 people every day by the police. She had, in that sense, I had some students that had more stats on this issue, but she provided some of the quantifiable data. Then on her second slide, this was a very interesting, from my perspective, on what the student did here, focusing. I mean, I think it had to do also with her choice of, when she did her search, what she found as called as the sources. it took her to a place that is interesting because usually students didn't talk that much about the police union, which does have an important impact on some of these debates on police reform. So she talked about community action programs, and in this case, I think some of these presentations are good because you can talk also about the zero tolerance policing that used to be basically the practices in New York City until relatively recently. And she went over this, and through the discussion, when we talk about these issues while the students are presenting, you have chat questions. And I thought it was when we were doing the presentations in the class, of course, it was like three students presented one day, and then another day another three students presented. We were able to go over some of these issues and discuss them in a class setting, which I thought were very relevant, like talking about also the racial profiling, the court decision, and the reaction by the then the mayor, Bloomberg. And so it was I think it was important thing from their perspective of looking at these different issues on policing and interaction of the police with legal institutions. Interesting and more legalized, I would say, with the courts, I meant to say, and with the political establishment or the political power. Then a lot of the students, that's why I thought it was also reinforcing each other. The students had different, some students had different ideas, even if they wanted reform, but they also help each other reinforce their ideas. So they also talk, this was very common, better training. Some students did emphasize the awareness of mental health issues, specific training for that purpose. So I thought it was interesting because also provided the students with the importance of cross-field research. Sorry, just one moment. I apologize for that. And they also went into the issues of justice and accountability, which will be relevant for, I would say, for the other, what we talk in this is done on the first half of the semester. And then on the second half of the semester, we talk about the court system and punishment. And they're already talking about some issues of accountability. This student, I particularly like her mentioning of the police union, because it's something that at least in my classes we have not talked much about the police union. This student was very, I think it has to do also with, as I mentioned before, with her sources. The student was very, I will say, clear on what she wanted the police union to be about. So wages, overtime, and well, she mentions disciplinary issues, which is kind of the goes into the crux of our discussion. And then she was talking about restrictions on dealing with criminal cases. This is something that will open debate and also clarification on my, on my side. And then she mentions again accountability. This student at least provided a full source citation, which is also good that they get used to this. Could have added the date that she, the date, but in some systems of citation is not used. And then the third slide, since we want students to also be active participants, we're in a democracy, so we need active citizenship. They want, what is considered like the indicators of participatory citizen would be keep up with current events. Also didn't specify how to do that, but she said that it should be like input for legislation. Some students do not think about this issue, speaking with local representatives, which is something that the students talk about but may not be doing themselves. And then she was talking also about the community involvement. So I think at least the student realized that as an individual, there are things that can be done. I have had, these were the fewer, but they had some responses in which the students said that as an individual citizen, there wasn't much that they could do.
We have 20 minutes left. We have 20 minutes left for our session.
Oh, yes. Yes, Sorry?
Oh, I'm sorry. I said we have 20 minutes left for our session.
Oh, okay. I just wanted, since I had the Q&A, I don't know, anybody wants any questions about this? This is a student, this is how the student presented it. Did they want to do some comments or questions and answers? Q&A for this, anybody? Any questions?
You can go ahead and put your questions in the chat box. You can raise your hand or go ahead and unmute yourself if you have any questions.
So these four slides were done by the student. Presented before the class session. Any comments or no? Well, I'm just going to present the other one. I mean, I don't see, is Cassandra in? No. So I'm just going to, go over the other students' presentation and just then I will wrap up. So the second student is Cassandra Martinez Rosario. And she basically, I mean, she also added the class she presented in, and she's followed the same pattern. I mean, they didn't have to use exactly the same words, but what is needed, why is it needed? So the student already is telling you that she is for police reform directly, and this student provided more specific data here on the number of people killed within the US. She could have provided more updated, but those were the sources that she found. Then she focused a lot on how citizens are feeling in different communities. Okay? The second one, she went over a list. She has here her sources, and she basically, as a student, she basically focused on 3 of the ones that she thought were important for the reform. That inadequate training, so she says that it's supposed to be done better training in the police academy. She focused on excessive use of force, and she also thinks that needs to be reevaluated. And as Ms. Dobre, she also talks about accountability. This was very common among the slides, that the students were focusing on accountability. And she also provides here with another source. She has her second source on the second section. She follows here with the need for reform. And then this is her 4th line on the slide. This should be a slide, but she has it in 4 lines. She thinks that we have to continue making pressure so something changes. She was more, in this sense, she was less, I would say, optimistic than the other student. And basically, those were the 2 presentations. I'm just going to finish, even though we are, there's not going to be questions, but I'm just going to. So after 3 students, I mean, in a regular class time, I will have time for at least 3 presentations. Because sometimes if the idea of reform is repeated, the student will only mention 1, and there will be less exchanges. Then I will wrap up the class. I will give them reminders, and the main reminders are what readings and assignments they have for the upcoming week. I will remind them of the office hours, in which they can, basically talk to me about content from the class, issues that they are having with the class. And usually I stay anytime, I could be anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. Like if you were in a face-to-face class with my students, just talking after class, if they have like something quick that they want to talk to me. It's kind of basically that would be how I'm trying to do it. Use my synchronous meetings in a more interactive way. This is not the way all the synchronous meetings go, but this is the example I had of a more interactive meeting. And let me see, what else did I have? So this was okay. Yes, this is something that I wanted to specify, that sometimes people are asking me and the students to the attendance. Well, Collaborate provides attendance times and names, and the only students that do not have their names placed there are the ones that access it via phone. But you can request that from the students at the beginning or at the end of the class. And then I mean, it's still time, right? Is there any questions? If there are no questions, I will just basically go over the slides. And the next slide, let me see, is I gave the students an overall feedback after I corrected their PowerPoint presentations before they presented in the class. And I thought everybody did a good job overall from the content perspective, but then I gave them some comments on what to do. So I think that if we evaluate learning as students becoming more active, more, I will say, themselves controlling production of knowledge, going out there and doing research, I think it's a good exercise to do this for students. And because how many of them are going to remember 5 or 10 years from now exactly how many years of instruction a police officer in Germany needs to go through to go to the first level, or in some other country, but they will remember how to do research, how to present to the classroom. I think those are skills that are also relevant. And as long as they also because they have exams and midterms, and in other classes I do ask them questions, and so they have to know their content. So I also provided them with some clues, and I know that some of them I didn't respect myself, but some students did it on their own to provide a title slide with the title of the project, the name and the course. Also to do a complete citation. It's not enough with a link. I have repeated this throughout the class during the semester, but it was like around week 4 or 5 of the semester. So I kept on until the end. So people students remember to do that. Also to revise for typos, and then not to cram too many words. I did cram too many words on the other one. So then I told them that I would want also students from law, because that's one of the issues. I think in one of the sessions, I actually was not 3. I was able to get 4 of these slides, because I have 2. It's one section, but I combine from 2 groups. Any questions? Any comments? Ritu, any? No?
No, it doesn't look like we have any
I'm just going
questions.
to
The chat
wrap up,
looks
and
good.
it's good for I mean, you see I'm so used to lecturing that I just feel like I'm lecturing again. So I'm just going to finish if I have the time. So, and the last one, this is from Professor María Elena Pizarro, which I think is also a very, I mean, it would be fantastic that I could have the time to also put this, apart from what I did with my class. And she also, she was going to participate. It wouldn't have not been me talking for almost 50 minutes, but basically she was setting up what was happening with citizens mobilizing and protesting against police misconduct and excessive use of force, and she gave some examples of what happens in police encounters. And also the other side, when police officers feel like they are being police themselves too much by a public that doesn't understand the stress to which they have to confront every day. So she provided the students with 2 sources that the students had to, one of them read, the other one watch before they answer the questions. I think it was very interesting. Both of them, I mean, are recommendable for anybody to read. You don't have to be undergrad in one of our courses. So it was what is like being a cop in America, and from Time magazine. So that's why it kind of with the link. And then she basically went over some of the issues of the reform. So this is similar to the first slide on the PowerPoint that I asked my students. Then, but she went also from the perspective of, do you think that there's a culture that is against the police? I had this discussion. We had this also when we were presenting some of the slides in the class. And then she had also a documentary on YouTube that had to do with slave catchers, slave resistors. So she made a connection to, in a way, policing. I don't know how many of you have read the new Jim Crow. So she made a connection between what the police does with African Americans, with people of color, and the people that used to catch slaves. So if there's a culture that has permeated our society, and that's why she asks, are there parallels with policing today? And then she has a second activity, which is more of a role-playing activity, in which the students, I think in principle, they're supposed to look at the UN, she doesn't mention them, but there are UN guidelines on best practices for the police, and also looking at international conventions on civil rights and civil liberties. And as a member of the commission, the student has to decide what the standards to recommend to the US. And then, I mean, it's kind of a lot of, this would be like a very thoughtful assignment, because also the second part would be what are the challenges or resistance that there will come from the police force, which are used to certain standards. And basically that was the, I hope that we had the students, but that's the idea that I had for a more interactive, in which you are using an actual online course, but in a more interactive, in which is not, as a professor, I'm not just there talking, even though that's what I did today. So basically that. So that was my idea of the interactive. And with that, I think, I know it's not the time, but if anybody has some comments or yes, no? Because it's almost, what time is it? Sorry, I am trying to look.
It is 11:37,
Okay, yeah,
so we can kind of wrap up, and if anyone has any additional questions,
comments are welcome. I mean, sorry.
Okay, so I'm actually going to go ahead and put a link in the chat for a survey. Feel free to be able to click on the link and take the survey for this session.
Okay.
And all of our presentations have been recorded, and they will be sent out by the Teaching and Learning Center. So if you have any questions, you can actually contact them directly. It's tlc@jjay.cuny.edu.
Okay. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming in today. And thank you, Ritu, so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. That was very informative. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, I'm sorry about we said the students and they didn't come. Sorry about that.
Hey, it happens.
Is the survey for everybody? Like,
it's for all participants. Yeah.
For participants. Okay. So. Okay.
And this is the same survey that you'll receive through every session. So as you go through each session, you can go ahead and click on the link and then take the survey.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and stop recording now. Thanks so much, Maria. Have a great day, everyone. Make sure you go to the lunch and the connections, and we'll see you there.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.